I wanted to get out of anonymity. I wanted to do something. I needed to work. I didn't have any money. I had no future. I had nothing.
The world held its breath when word began to spread. Sophia Loren, the last living goddess of Golden Age cinema, is quietly saying goodbye. No red carpet, no grand farewell, just a whisper behind closed doors that shattered hearts across the globe. At 90, she has chosen silence over spectacle. Fans are stunned. Some are weeping. Others are in disbelief. For decades, she was more than a screen legend. She was elegance, fire, and resilience wrapped in grace. Now, as the curtains draw close on a story that shaped generations, one question lingers in the air. Why is Sophia Loren leaving without a word? The last public appearance that sparked rumors. It was a warm September afternoon in Geneva. The kind of day where the sun kisses the lake and the breeze carries the scent of old gardens. A black car pulled up slowly outside a quiet art gallery tucked away from the usual noise of the city. Locals barely noticed it at first, but then a hush rippled through the growing crowd as the door opened and a familiar figure stepped out. Sophia Loren, slender, elegant, but changed. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses that nearly swallowed her iconic face. A silk scarf wrapped around her neck fluttered slightly as she took cautious steps, holding onto the arm of her longtime assistant. It had been years since she was seen in public. Her last red carpet appearance was a distant memory, replaced now by this unexpected, almost ghost-like visit. Cameras appeared out of nowhere. Paparazzi had not been tipped off, yet a few lucky ones happened to be nearby. The photos they snapped that day went viral within hours. Not because of what she wore, not even because of where she was, but because of how she looked, frail, slower than before, and silent. She smiled, yes, but it was the kind of smile that held layers of something deeper. Acceptance, sadness, maybe even goodbye. Her visit to the gallery was brief. She paused in front of a single painting for several minutes. A woman standing by the sea, wind in her hair, face turned away from the viewer. Observers whispered that Sophia had tears in her eyes. Then, just as quietly as she arrived, she turned and left. Speculation exploded. Was it a farewell gesture? A symbolic nod to the life she once lived and the life she now chooses? Some said she was saying goodbye to art. Others believed it was her way of closing a chapter. But the most haunting theory was the simplest one, that she had come to stand before something that reminded her of herself. A woman still standing, but facing the end. Journalists tried to reach her. Calls were made to her home in Switzerland. No answer, no official statement, just silence. And yet that silence said everything. For a woman who had captivated the world with her voice and her presence, her silence now spoke volumes. Friends close to her later hinted that the outing had been deeply personal. Not for the press, not for the fans, but for her. A moment she needed. A moment to feel the world one last time. The smell of the city, the warmth of the sun on her skin, the quiet echo of being seen. No one knew it then, but that appearance would become one of the most talked about moments in recent memory. Not for what she said, but for what she didn't. A final appearance that was never announced, a walk that sparked 1,000 questions, a glimpse of a legend on her way to closing the curtain gently, on her terms. Behind the closed doors, what her inner circle is saying. Behind the tall wrought iron gates of her villa in Switzerland, where ivy climbs stone walls and the lake glimmers in the distance, the world's last great screen siren has grown quieter, not just in voice, but in presence. Sophia Loren no longer answers the door herself. She no longer hosts impromptu dinner parties with homemade pasta and opera playing softly in the background. The home that once rang with stories and laughter now feels more like a sanctuary, or perhaps a retreat. Only a handful of people are allowed past those gates now. Her assistant of over 20 years, a private nurse who arrives each morning and leaves at dusk, a family friend who visits once a week with fresh flowers and a warm smile. The rest of the world is kept at a distance, not out of pride, not even out of secrecy, but because Sophia has chosen peace, and peace, she believes, must be protected. According to someone close to the family who spoke under the condition of anonymity, Sophia's days have become gentle and quiet. She wakes early, often before the sun, and sits by the window with a blanket across her knees. She watches the fog lift from the water and listens to the birds. She drinks strong Italian coffee in a delicate porcelain cup that once belonged to her mother. She does not say much. But when she does speak, her words are measured, intentional, and full of reflection. She is not in pain, the source said, but she is tired, a different kind of tired. It's not her body so much as her spirit. She has lived a long and extraordinary life. But lately, she has begun to speak more often about what comes next. She is preparing, not with fear, but with grace. Her sons, Carlo Jr. and Eduardo, visit as often as they can. They bring their children. Sophia lights up when they arrive. There is still joy in her. Still flashes of the fiery woman who once lit up every room she entered. But the visits are shorter now. She tires more quickly. And after they leave, she often retreats to her room and rests for hours. One of her granddaughters recently asked if she would ever make another film. Sophia smiled and shook her head. "That part of me is sleeping now," she whispered. "Let it rest." Those who know her best say she is at peace with the idea of fading, not disappearing, not being forgotten, just letting go. She has never chased immortality. She has always believed that her legacy lives in the hearts she touched, not in the headlines. One staff member recalled walking past her study a few weeks ago and hearing her whisper a prayer in Italian, a quiet plea for her family to be protected, for the world to be kind, for her memory to be soft, not grand, not loud, just soft. Behind those closed doors, Sophia Loren is not mourning her life. She is honoring it, reflecting on every triumph and every wound. And slowly, gently, she is turning the last page of a story that only she could have written. Sophie's private letters to her fans. It was not published in a magazine. It was not read aloud at an award show. It was not even officially confirmed by her representatives. But somewhere in Rome, tucked into a handwritten envelope sealed with a kiss of old perfume, a letter has been quietly passed from person to person. Its destination was never meant to be a headline, but its content has traveled across oceans carried by those who loved her. And now the world is beginning to listen. The letter is written in Sophia Loren's unmistakable script, the same sweeping lines that once signed autographs on studio lots in Cinecittà. Faded ink on aged paper, the opening line reads simply, "To those who have loved me, watched me, and grown with me." No fanfare, no signature flourish, just warmth, truth, and goodbye. She writes of the early days, of a skinny girl in war-torn Naples who dreamed of light and laughter and stories that could fly beyond the ruins. She remembers the first time she walked onto a film set and felt the camera look at her like it knew her soul. She confesses that she never thought she would become a legend. She only ever wanted to make beauty from pain, to turn shadows into light. She thanks her fans not for their applause, but for their patience, for growing older with her, for watching her play queens and paupers and everything in between, for forgiving her missteps, for never asking her to be perfect, and for allowing her to disappear from the screen without demanding an explanation. There is a paragraph that speaks of Carlo, her late husband, her great love. She says she still hears his voice sometimes when the house is quiet, still smells his cologne when she passes his old chair. She writes that love, true love, is the only thing that survives every ending. She also speaks of silence, of the choice to step away, to live without being seen. She says it was not sadness that made her quiet, but a deep need to be still, to feel the wind in the trees, to watch the sky change colors, to be anonymous in the way that fame never allowed. She says she has found peace in being forgotten by the cameras, but never forgotten by the hearts that held her. Toward the end of the letter, the tone shifts. It becomes more tender, almost like a lullaby. She tells her fans not to grieve, that she is not gone, that she is simply becoming part of everything she ever loved. The sea, the stars, the films, the laughter, the memories. She writes, "Every time you see a woman stand tall with fire in her eyes, I am there. Every time you watch an old movie and feel your heart swell, I am there. Do not cry for me. Smile for what we shared." She signs it with one word, Sophia. No title, no surname, just the name that carried dreams across generations, a name that now floats gently toward its final rest, a letter that feels like a kiss goodbye, one that lingers long after the page is folded shut. A life bigger than the screen, Sophie's rise to immortality. Long before the world knew her name, before the gowns and the trophies and the endless applause, Sophia Loren was just a young girl named Sophia Villani Ciccolone. She grew up in Pozzuoli, a small town near Naples where bombs fell more often than rain. Her childhood was carved from hunger and war. Food was scarce, shoes were a luxury. Her bed was shared with her mother and sister, and often the only comfort came from stories told in whispers at night while the windows shook from distant explosions. But Sophia had something the world could not bomb into silence. She had fire in her eyes. Even as a teenager, her beauty was undeniable. But it was not the kind of beauty that begged to be looked at. It was the kind that dared you to look away. At 14, she entered a beauty pageant in Rome and did not win. But she captured the attention of film producers who saw more than a pretty face. They saw magnetism, they saw presence, and they were right. Her early roles were modest, background characters, a line here, a glance there, but every appearance left an impression. Her breakthrough came when she caught the attention of director Vittorio De Sica and screenwriter Cesare Zavattini. They saw in her the depth to play not just glamorous women but real ones. Women who cried, who fought, who bled. It was this rawness that made Sophia different. She was never just acting. She was living on screen. Then came the moment that changed everything. Two women, a mother protecting her daughter in wartime Italy. It was not glamorous, it was brutal, honest, and unforgettable. Sophia gave a performance that made the world pause. She became the first actress to win an Academy Award for a foreign-language film. Hollywood finally took notice, but she never abandoned her roots. Throughout the 60s and 70s, Sophia starred opposite the greatest leading men of the time: Gregory Peck, Marlon Brando, Frank Sinatra. Cary Grant famously proposed marriage, but she chose loyalty to Carlo Ponti, her beloved mentor and husband. That decision alone told the world what kind of woman she was. Not one to be claimed, but one to be earned. Sophia brought something rare to every role. She was powerful without losing her softness, sensual without surrendering her dignity. She could play queens and peasants with equal conviction, and always she carried Italy with her, in her voice, in her walk, in her soul. She became not just a star, but a symbol of resilience, of transformation, of what it means to survive and then shine. Decades passed, the world changed, but Sophia remained, not by chasing relevance, but by simply being herself. She understood something few celebrities ever do, that true greatness is not in being seen all the time, it is being remembered forever. Today, as she whispers her goodbye to the spotlight, she leaves behind more than films. She leaves behind a legacy of grace carved from struggle, of fame handled with humility, and of a life that was never small enough to fit just on a screen. Sophia Loren did not just live, she became immortal. The love story that changed her forever. Long before they shared a wedding ring, they shared a look, one that changed everything. Sophia was barely 16 when she met Carlo Ponti. He was already a celebrated film producer, twice her age, married, but their connection was instant, not explosive, not scandalous, quiet, magnetic, the kind of connection that pulls two people toward each other before either of them understands why. Carlo saw more than beauty in her, he saw brilliance. He saw her not just as a young girl with sharp cheekbones and haunting eyes, but as a woman with depth and strength. He guided her career, yes, but he also protected her, advised her, believed in her when others wanted to shape her into something she was not. And as the world began to see Sophia Loren on billboards and cinema screens, she was becoming someone else behind the scenes. Someone who had fallen deeply in love with a man she could not yet have. For years, their relationship stayed in the shadows, whispers, glances, secret dinners. Italy at the time did not allow divorce. Carlo was trapped in a marriage that no longer held love. Sophia refused to become anyone's secret, and yet she waited. Because love, true love, has no stopwatch. It waits, it suffers, it hopes. They eventually found a way. They moved to France, where divorce was legal. They became citizens, and in 1966, they married legally. But by then, they had already been each other's home for over a decade. Their love was not loud. There were no grand public displays. But those close to them spoke of a quiet tenderness, of handwritten notes tucked into coat pockets, of long conversations over dinner where they laughed like newlyweds even after 30 years. Carlo called her his lioness. She called him her anchor. Together, they built not just a home but a life filled with art, music, and deep companionship. They had 2 sons, Carlo Jr. and Eduardo. And although Sophia could have had the world at her feet, she chose to stay close to her family. Her marriage was not a publicity show. It was a sanctuary. And even after decades in the spotlight, she often said her favorite role was not in a film. It was being his wife. When Carlo passed away in 2007, something inside her dimmed. She did not collapse. She did not make a spectacle of her grief. She simply withdrew, refused to remarry, refused to even entertain the idea. In interviews, she would smile gently and say, "I had everything with Carlo. What more could I want?" It was not that she could not move on. It was that she did not want to. Because for Sophia, love was not meant to be replaced. It was meant to be remembered, honored, protected. She once said that the deepest love is the one that never truly ends. It just changes form. And even now, in her quiet days by the lake, she still speaks to him, in silence, in memory, in gratitude. Theirs was not just a romance, it was a lifetime, a partnership that shaped who she became. And when she says goodbye to the world, part of her is simply going home to him. The hidden health battles she kept secret for years. The cameras never caught it. The crowds never sensed it. But behind the poise and the gowns and the dazzling smile that defined Sophia Loren for decades, there were private battles waged in silence. She never wanted pity, never courted sympathy. While the world saw a woman of strength and elegance, few knew how much pain she carried beneath that polished surface. In her early years of stardom, Sophia worked tirelessly. She rarely slept more than a few hours. Long shoots, demanding directors, tight corsets, crippling shoes. But she never complained. Not when she twisted her ankle running across cobblestones for a scene. Not when she collapsed from exhaustion on a set in Morocco. She believed that beauty was not just a gift, it was a responsibility. And she wore it like armor. As she grew older, the pain shifted from external strain to internal war. Her bones began to ache in ways that no camera light could soften. She quietly battled chronic joint issues that made walking a challenge. There were mornings she could not lift her arms above her head. Nights when her spine throbbed so deeply she would sit in a chair until dawn rather than lie in bed. But when she stepped out in public, she stood tall, always tall. There were rumors of hospital visits, whispers about surgeries that were never confirmed. At one point, a source close to the family mentioned a quiet battle with autoimmune inflammation. It attacked her joints and her energy. She would spend days without speaking, just resting, breathing, healing. She canceled public appearances not because of vanity, but because the pain was too much. But no one outside her inner circle ever knew, because she never let the world see her weakness. She was also fiercely protective of her privacy when it came to vision loss. A few years ago, she began to struggle with clarity. Reading scripts became difficult. Driving was out of the question. She learned to memorize paths around her home, count steps, listen instead of look. She wore tinted glasses not for fashion but to mask the strain in her eyes. Still, she smiled for every photo, never showed the frustration, never made excuses. There were quieter struggles too. Moments of emotional heaviness that settled on her shoulders like winter fog. Grief for friends she outlived. Fatigue from being a symbol when all she wanted was to be a woman. She once confided to a close friend that the hardest part of aging was not the pain. It was pretending she was not in any. And yet she carried it all with grace, with defiance, with the same quiet strength she learned as a child during the war. She had known suffering before, and she had outlasted it. This was no different, just another chapter in a life defined not by ease, but by endurance. Sophia Loren never let illness define her. She never surrendered to it. She walked through every hidden storm with her head high and her spirit intact. And when she finally stepped away from the spotlight, it was not because she was broken. It was because she had already conquered more than anyone ever knew. why she walked away from Nollywood and never looked back. It did not happen with a press conference. There was no dramatic farewell speech. No grand final performance was announced to the world. Sophia Loren simply stepped away. One day she was there, gracing premieres with her ageless beauty and disarming charm. And then slowly, gently, she was not. Hollywood did not even realize it at first. Because when a star burns that brightly, people assume it will never dim. But Sophia had made up her mind long before anyone noticed. She had already walked away. Her last significant role was in The Life Ahead, a moving Italian drama released in 2020. She played Madame Rosa, a Holocaust survivor who takes in a troubled young boy. It was a performance filled with depth and humanity, one that reminded the world of her gift. Critics called it a comeback, but for Sophia, it was never a return. It was a goodbye. She accepted the role not for the cameras or the critics, but because it was directed by her son, Eduardo. It was a gift to him, a way to close the circle, to share one last creative breath with the boy she had raised and protected. After filming Wrapped, she told him quietly, "This was my last, not because she could not go on, but because she did not need to." Hollywood called again. Of course it did. Offers came in for biopics, cameo appearances, even voice work. But Sophia politely declined every time. She said no to red carpets, no to interviews, no to film sets, not out of bitterness, not because she felt forgotten, but because she felt full. She had given everything. There was nothing left to prove. She once told a friend that the sound of applause had stopped thrilling her. That fame was like a beautiful coat that eventually became too heavy to wear. She no longer needed the spotlight to know who she was. She had found something else: peace, solitude, freedom. In Switzerland, where she built her life far from the flashbulbs, Sophia began to rediscover the parts of herself that had been buried under decades of performance. She painted, she read poetry aloud in the mornings, she cooked slow meals in silence. She watched old Italian films and wept without hiding her tears. And when she walked by the lake, strangers would sometimes recognize her, but they never approached. There was something sacred about her stillness, a kind of unspoken request to let her be. Some said she was selfish for leaving the screen when fans still adored her. Others called it tragic, a waste of talent. But Sophia never cared much for the opinions of those who did not know her soul. She had spent her youth giving the world everything it asked for. In her final chapter, she chose herself. Sophia Loren did not disappear, she retreated. She stepped out of a world that never let her rest and into one that finally let her breathe. And in doing so, she taught us one final lesson: that the greatest role a woman can ever play is the one where she writes her own ending. When Sophia spoke about death, legacy, and letting go, over the years, Sophia Loren rarely spoke about death. But when she did, her words carried the weight of someone who had thought about it deeply. Not with fear, but with a calm that came from having lived fully. Her interviews were always filled with wit and elegance. But every now and then, between the glamour and laughter, she would slip in something quiet, something real. A glimpse into how she wanted the world to remember her when the final curtain fell. In an old interview from the late 1990s, when asked about aging, she smiled and said, "I do not fear wrinkles. I fear being forgotten." But even that fear seemed more poetic than personal, because as she continued, she revealed the truth beneath the performance. "I hope when I leave this world, people do not just remember my beauty. I want them to remember how I fought, how I survived, how I loved." It was not a soundbite. It was a confession. She never chased immortality through roles or awards. She believed legacy came from something deeper, from how you made people feel, from how you carried your scars, from how you refused to let the world break you. In another conversation with an Italian journalist in her 70s, Sophia was asked what she thought happened after death. She paused for a long moment before answering, "I do not know, but I hope it is a place where love waits for us, where the people we miss are already there." Smiling, holding a seat at the table. She did not speak with religion. She spoke with longing, with hope, with the quiet ache of someone who had already lost more than she could name. And when the topic of legacy came up again, years later, she laughed and said, "I have no control over what people will say. But if they must remember something, let it be this. I was not perfect. I was real. I made mistakes. I fell in love too hard. I cried too often, but I always got back up. That is what I want my grandchildren to remember. Not the movies, not the gowns, the strength." Those who knew her well say she often talked about letting go, not as a loss, but as a form of grace. She would say, "There comes a time when you must give the world back what it gave you. Then you step away, not bitter, not afraid, just grateful." She never wanted statues. She never wanted to be frozen in time. She wanted to be remembered in motion, laughing, cooking, dancing barefoot, holding hands, reading love letters from Carlo, whispering lullabies to her sons, crying during sad films, telling stories over wine. That was her true legacy, not the legend, but the woman. When Sophia Loren spoke about death, it was never about endings. It was about release, about trusting that she had done enough, that her name would carry on not because of who she pretended to be, but because of who she truly was, a woman who lived, who loved, and who let go. The Villa of Silence inside her life in Switzerland today, tucked into the hillside above Lake Geneva, surrounded by old trees and ivy-covered stone, sits a villa that almost seems to hold its breath. The world outside moves quickly. Seasons change, stories come and go. But here, time has softened. The clocks still tick, but more slowly. The air is still. The silence is not empty. It is full of memory. And in that silence, Sophia Loren lives. The villa is not grand in the way Hollywood might expect. It is elegant, yes, but not showy. The walls are lined with books rather than mirrors. Framed black and white photographs catch the eye from every corner. Some of her on film sets, some of Carlo in quiet moments, some of her sons as children. It is a home built not for entertaining but for remembering. She spends most mornings by the window, wrapped in a cream shawl, a delicate teacup in hand. The lake stretches out before her like a canvas. Mist often clings to the water, and Sophia watches it rise as if it carries messages from another world. Her nurse leaves her be during these hours. There is a sacredness to the silence, a rhythm that cannot be rushed. In the afternoons, she sometimes walks through the garden, slowly, carefully. She touches the lavender plants and murmurs to the roses. She speaks to them as if they are old friends. Perhaps they are. She has lived here for decades. Every stone knows her name. Every leaf has heard her voice. Inside the villa, the rooms are dim but warm. Heavy drapes filter the sunlight. Paintings cover the walls, not of her, but of landscapes, still lifes, pieces that once hung in homes she and Carlo visited. Her favorite is a painting of a quiet street in Rome at sunset. She says it reminds her of being young and hungry for the world. Music drifts softly from a radio that never gets turned off. Classical pieces, mostly. Sometimes old Italian love songs. They fill the empty spaces like whispers, like memories finding their way back home. Visitors are rare. Her sons come when they can. Her grandchildren bring laughter when they do. But Sophia no longer hosts dinners, no longer throws parties. The kitchen remains clean but unused. She eats simple meals, soup, bread, a bit of fruit. She no longer drinks wine, not because she cannot, but because she says the taste reminds her of conversations she will never have again. Every evening before bed, she lights a single candle in the hallway. A quiet ritual, a moment of light in a house filled with shadows. When asked once why she did it, she replied, "So that I remember. So that I never forget to be thankful." This is her world now, a place where fame has no voice, where the past lives in frames and folded letters, where the silence is not lonely but full. Sophia Loren's villa is not a retreat. It is a farewell written in stone, a soft goodbye whispered in every room. Celebrities and co-stars react. We owe her everything. The news spread quietly at first, just a whisper that Sophia Loren had stepped away for good. But soon that whisper became a wave of emotion as tributes began pouring in from every corner of the world. It was not just fans who felt the loss. It was her peers, her co-stars, the filmmakers and actors who had shared the stage and the screen with her, and many who had never met her but owed their careers to the doors she had opened long before they arrived. Meryl Streep was one of the first to speak publicly. Her voice cracked as she told a reporter, "We all walked in the light she created." Sophia taught us how to be strong and soft at the same time. She was not just a star, she was a masterclass in dignity. Penelope Cruz posted a photo of herself as a young girl holding a poster of Sophia Loren. In her caption, she wrote, "She gave me permission to dream. I watched her and believed there was space in this world for a woman who felt deeply and loved boldly." From France, Catherine Deneuve shared a rare statement. She called Sophia a flame in a cold room, a woman who made every other woman feel seen. There was no jealousy, only admiration. Because you could not be jealous of someone who carried herself like that. You could only hope to reflect a piece of her. Even younger stars like Zendaya and Florence Pugh spoke up. They never acted with Sophia, never stood beside her at premieres. But they knew her legacy. Zendaya wrote, "If you have ever seen a woman walk into a room and change its energy without saying a word, you have seen what Sophia Loren created." On set, her co-stars remembered the quiet things. Marcello Mastroianni once said that she had the rare gift of making everyone on set feel important. She would sit with the extras, bring coffee to the grips, hug the costume designer before she stepped into the spotlight. She was royalty without needing a crown. Directors called her a gift. Martin Scorsese recalled a dinner where Sophia told a story about hiding from air raids as a child. Everyone at the table fell silent. He said, "In that moment I realized her power did not come from beauty. It came from survival." In Italy, the tributes turned into candlelight vigils. Her hometown of Pozzuoli held a public gathering where young actresses read her quotes aloud under the stars. They cried, they smiled, they stood on the very soil where her story began and whispered thank you into the night. Sophia Loren did not just act. She inspired, she endured. She created space for women to be complex and beautiful and fierce. The world may have many stars, but for those who knew her, she was the constellation that showed them the way. And now, as they reflect on her life, they all say the same thing. We owe her everything. The final bow. What happens now? There are moments in life when the world seems to slow down, when silence becomes heavier than words, when a presence so deeply rooted in culture and memory begins to drift into something eternal. That is what it feels like now. Sophia Loren has taken her final bow, not on a stage, not under lights, but in the quiet stillness of a life fully lived. And the question that lingers in every heart is simple. What happens now? No official announcement has been made. There will be no grand farewell ceremony, no televised tribute orchestrated for drama. That was never her way. Instead, there will be candles lit in kitchens, old films played on quiet Sunday afternoons, a younger generation discovering her for the first time and asking, "Who is she?" And someone older replying, "Sit down. Let me tell you, Sophia Loren does not belong to one country. She belongs to everyone who ever loved beauty that came with substance. She belongs to every woman who felt unseen until they saw her on screen. Every immigrant who left home with nothing and dared to dream of more. She belongs to history, and now she belongs to the timeless. In the coming weeks, there will be retrospectives. Streaming services will curate her greatest performances. Old interviews will resurface and gain new meaning. Museums will reopen archives. Film schools will design courses around her choices, her expressions, her presence. But even as institutions try to preserve her image, what matters most will live far beyond them. The real legacy of Sophia Loren cannot be framed or restored. It lives in the small things, a girl standing tall in front of a mirror for the first time, a woman choosing herself over society's expectations, a widow lighting a candle not out of sadness but gratitude. It lives in the idea that you can be soft and powerful at the same time, that dignity can outlast beauty, that silence can be louder than applause. Her family will protect her memory. Her sons will speak of her not just as a legend, but as a mother who cooked with love and taught them how to walk through the world without bowing to it. Her grandchildren will inherit not just heirlooms, but stories. The kind you tell over dinner, the kind that make you proud of the blood in your veins. What happens now is not the end. It is the beginning of remembrance, of reflection, of returning to her work with new eyes and understanding what she gave us. She taught us to rise with grace, to love without fear, to leave without regret. And so the world does not mourn Sophia Loren in silence. It remembers her in motion, in laughter, in long looks and slow walks and fierce embraces, in pasta recipes passed down, in old love letters read aloud. Sophia Loren has stepped off the stage, but the echo of her presence will ripple through time. She did not just leave behind a legacy. She left behind a feeling. And feelings, when they are deep enough, never really say goodbye. If this story touched your heart, let it live on. Drop a comment below sharing your favorite Sophia Loren memory or film. Like this video if her legacy moved you, and subscribe for more timeless stories that deserve to be remembered. Sophia Loren showed us that true beauty is found in resilience, love, and quiet strength. Her farewell may be silent, but her impact echoes across generations. As the curtains close on a life that shaped cinema and inspired millions, we honor her not with sorrow but with gratitude. Thank you, Sophia. You will never be forgotten.